Hi, I'm Mara Webster with Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. We're so delighted today to be joined by the always wonderful Julie Delpy, who is the writer and director and actor of the latest Netflix series, On the Verge. And I wanted to start by talking a lot about the journey and the genesis of this project coming to screen, because this is something that you first started ruminating on in about 2012, 2013, I think, from and so it really has been an almost 10-year journey from that initial conceptualization and idea to screen. And because you've spoken about how it came from a really personal place in terms of your own relationship with work, your own relationship with motherhood, and a lot of your friends around you as well, over that writing and development period over the years, what are some of the spaces in which the story for you and certain beats within the characters really evolved as you and your friends were going through different experiences that you felt like you could pull into these characters?
Well, I think there were more and more things to be told, because as we evolved, there were more anecdotes and things. I changed a lot of stuff from the original story in 2012 or 2013. The pilot reflects a little more the original, but then really the minute you get to the second episode, it moves into really what the show is about, So the presentation is, the pilot is always tricky for me, but not that I've done many pilots, but this one was a little tricky because it's like you have to introduce 4 characters plus, more characters around in 30 minutes. So it's really, you need to really pick and choose what you want to tell about those people. But I always love to reveal more slowly about someone. Like, I don't want to give away that this person is really insecure, that's why she's acting out, I want to I'm used to film, so I like to kind of reveal slowly what people really are about, and not on the nose be like, okay, this person is like this and that's how she's going to be for the rest of the show. I hate doing that, so I kind of everyone actually becomes something else. And that's why I called it On the Verge. Also, it's because there's such an evolution within the 12 episode of those characters and their dynamic, that it's at the beginning who they are, and at the beginning what they become is already different over 2 months, and I thought that was fun to explore. But it's true that it evolved, because yes, I was 43 when I started writing, and I became 50 when I shot the series. So it was definitely a different vibe. And also the kid in the original, synopsis, it was a 4-year-olds, and it became 12-year-olds, So it's very, very different dynamic, and actually more fun, because I love babies and kids, but preteens and stuff have so much to say. They're becoming also those great people that kind of take care of their mothers in a way. Also, they're sometimes more level-headed than the moms. Certain moms, not all of them, but 1 or 2.
And with that idea of the evolution and the way that you introduce characters and then create this gradual build of what we know and their narrative arc throughout the show, it's not just about each singular journey with these 4 characters. It's the way that the rhythms and their stories intertwine and interlace with each other each moment. So, maybe there's a comedic moment happening with one character and there's a much more emotional moment happening with the other, and how that pulls together and creates a really interesting context. So in shaping a lot of the structure over the 12 episodes, what was your process of not just looking at what's the journey of this particular character, but the way in which you wanted to use them to really intertwine and create these really unique tones from that?
Yeah, with my co-writer, we were really careful at not, for example, if someone was getting somewhere at one episode, we made sure that the other person was not getting somewhere at the same time, so we would really build, it was kind of a card castle, everything was holding each other. It's really difficult actually to do something on 12 episodes about so many characters. So you really have to go over each script over and over and over to make sure, and then sometimes read a whole read through of 6 hours to just make sure it's all and then eventually, of course, when you're editing, you can correct the few mistakes that you made when it's repetitive in one episode. You just move it around, or, take it out. Sometimes, we had to take out a few scenes that didn't really match anymore. That was repetitive was another. Sometimes, it's beyond, it's almost too much to take. It's 360 pages of screenplay, so, but it's very interesting to build something so big. It's like building 4 films, at once. So it's extra work. let's say, and we were two people. It was a third one that did one episode, but really the construction of everything, well, the original construction of everything was me alone, and I had to figure out arcs and stuff. And then eventually I had my co-writer, kind of going over things and working together. But it was fun. It was fun. What I like is that, I think they're not stereotypical, stereotypical women for what we're used to see, I think. They have flaws, yes, some people will be like, oh, but I wish they were sweeter and cuter. And I'm like, okay, well, if you don't like women that are from the real world, then get yourself some kind of a fantasy movie where there's a princess with a nice dress and she's like tiptoeing through the room, making no noise at all, making slow noise like this, and they're very sweet. So this is not the characters I'm describing. They're really opinionated women, strong, insecure, fragile, angry at times, scared. They have all those different, because when I grew up writing, I always remembered like studying Shakespeare, for example. And I was always obsessed with the fact that in Shakespeare, the men have all the dimension. For example, Hamlet is the most multidimensional character. He's crazy, he's sane, he's smart, he's stupid, he's violent, he's kind, he's caring, he's hateful. So you have everything in him. And you have the women characters, and they're one or two dimension. And it's been the same probably until the 70s, or there were a few exceptions throughout history of cinema. But actually during the 40s, sometimes there were better parts for women that, other times and stuff. So, it's really about like finding those multidimensional, not perfect women that, you might not love them at first, but they become more and more real. And, I feel it would be very superficial to turn them into one thing right away. I feel like I don't want to know everything about a character on the first episode. I don't want to know who they are until who they are in their complexity, because then that means the person is not complex if you know where they are because with a 30-minute episode, it's 6 minutes each, or not even for each character. So that means you're able to figure out like who a person is in 6 minutes, like doesn't exist anywhere on earth. So I find it more interesting to really suddenly get into them and like them more, and, they become more and more real.
Yeah. And within a lot of that multi-dimension, it's about their relationships with each other and who they are, having that really granular reality. But also there's a real dialogue around who these women are as a result of the way that their partners, their family, their friends and society treats them and talks to them. You have Yasmin, who's told in a job interview, well, you might find the coworkers to be a little too juvenile, which is very passive aggressive language towards her. And if we look at your character, there's a lot of aspects of her having to step back and take up less space in her relationship, even down to the physical manifestation of her husband is the one who isn't working and is looking for a job, yet he's the one who has the entire study and she has a tiny corner in the kitchen.
I know. Yeah. It was fun to build these little details for me. She's writing with the toilet paper rolls on her head, basically, and he has the giant place, and she's the one working day and night, barely seeing her kid, like being exhausted every day. And he's the one, with the giant office, and I thought it was funny, but it's details like that are fun to play with. For me. But go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off. But and of course, Yasmin, it's so obvious that she's so insecure of the fact that, okay, she gave up work and she's brilliant. She's probably the smartest of all of them, but she's not working. She's completely dependent financially from her husband, and it's driving her insane, which I know people like that, like very, very bright women who kind of put things aside. And I can see their unease. Like I can see when they go crazy and suddenly they will snap at you and disappear, and you're like, what happened? And it's not because of you, it's because of what they're going through, and I think it's important to describe this reality to me. I just think I like to go there. I like to see that.
It is, and if we look at your character in particular as an example of that, and all of the different ways in which she's asked to take up less space, even within her own home, how did you want to approach that dialogue around the internal impact that has? Because it also really affects her own self-validation, her own self-worth, the things that she wants to kind of make the effort pushing forward for. And then in one of the later episodes, when there is someone who lifts his head up and looks at her for the first time, there's a real transition in the way that you play her in those scenes as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny because you really think she's so beat up by her personal life that she's never going to bounce back, but she has the ability to do that because she's not completely crushed, she's not, because he's abusive, but in a kind of a subtle way, but she's also realizing, oh my God, what the heck am I doing with this guy? What am I doing with my life? I'm trying so hard to make it work when it's what is the point? And I find it funny also at the very end that he turns it around a little bit, like he becomes nice again. And it's so confusing, it's like, it's torture, what she's going through. So I had fun with that. I had fun with all this variation. And, I think the show is really a 12-episode show and should be almost watched as such. A lot of people have been binging from beginning to end, I hear, but it's really a show. If you watch one episode, you have no idea what the show is about. No idea, and I think, and you can't even it's, the show is about the 12 episodes and the beginning to the end, because really it ends with the first image of the beginning also, which is like women in this war, right? It's not really a war, but I mean, it looks like it. So, struggling, so yeah, I mean, there is little details like that throughout each character's story also. Anne, who's a really giving, kind of nurturing person, you realize that her life was never about being nurtured herself. Like she's always nurturing, but you can see when you meet her mother, it was the opposite thing for her life. And she became the extreme opposite of her mother. But then eventually she has to let go also of her money. I mean, I just think it's interesting. Also, for me, it was interesting to talk about social status, how some people have different situation. My character, if she doesn't work, she's done, right? She has no income. And I really like that also. And Elle is struggling with money, and the other one has a lot of money, but it's not her money. And, and the price that comes with taking someone else's money. And even Yasmin, she's being fed by her husband and he's very nice, but, she's still dependent, Sometimes it works for some people, but for her, it's not, she's not happy.
And with your writing and your filmmaking, one of the things that I always love tonally is the way that you're able to interweave between such different spaces within, the inflection of half a word. We go from a heartfelt emotional moment to a comedic moment. And the comedy works when you push it further because it's always grounded and it's always coming back to character. So if we look at the later episode where, you're really kind of going into the larger aspect of the comedic side of the show, where there's an outdoor party in LA, Madonna's showing up as a guest, there's a truck the driveway where the fish didn't arrive in time, so they're running across with boxes of fish.
Oh, that's a complete comedic. Yeah. It's like the more like comedic scenes and stuff. Yeah.
But every single beat of why those consecutive scenes work so well is because it all comes back to the interpersonal dynamic and the relationships of these characters in between. And so when you're kind of weaving tones and pushing the comedy a little bit further, are you always really conscious about making sure that structurally it does come back from that place as a core?
Yes, of course. I mean, to me, the characters are really important to be, to be truthful and to be, to me, it's the glue of the whole story. You can have comedy, but if there is no glue, and the glue is really all those character dynamic, for example, at the party, the episode 8, between Elle and, she wants to help her friend, but she knows she's, going to forget something. She's very worried about, but at the same time, this dynamic is really fun. And then the two others show up completely high. I mean, but it's really, at the same time, you feel, and there's moments of more seriousness about them talking about like what the meaning of their life is and what they wanted to be and didn't become or whatever, like real question we ask ourselves, especially, at a middle-aged stage of your life, you're like, did I do what I wanted, or did I become what I wanted, or am I can I still become what I want to be, because there's also, to me, this big possibility throughout the show is that it's not done yet, like what if you decide that you want to be something completely different, At one point, my character is checking like change career in your 40s and late 40s, and it's telling her stuff she really doesn't want to do. But I just think it's funny that you can still think about other options. But for me, it's essential. The character is the glue. The characters and their interaction is the glue, and then the comedy comes on top of it. But it's the street, the whatever. It's the structure underneath it.
Yeah. Were you thinking intentionally about the specific tonal voice that you wanted each episode to have? Because a lot of them kind of sit and resonate with you in different ways, whether it is, that more comedic sensibility or really, really heartfelt emotional moments that you kind of sit with after the end of each episode.
I mean, it's true that, for example, I knew that in the middle kind of episode could be more comedic with more funny moments, the photo shoot, also, when that scene came up about that scene facing me, Julie, I wanted something, suddenly you come out of our comfort zone of complete reality. It becomes a little bit weirder, which I thought was funny to introduce that episode. What was it, 10? So suddenly I give myself a little more freedom in the tone and stuff. But, it's good too. So the first episode, I think I'm more a setup towards like, you have to set up the character a little bit and stuff. And then you get into more of the comedy. And then I think 11 and 12, which I both directed and really enjoyed doing so, was a real resolution to a lot of stuff, and also is starting off of something else towards 12, where I know it's kind of weird to do that for the end of a season, but I wanted to end on something that leaves the door open to a lot of possibilities for those characters. And it ends, I mean, I don't want to say exactly how it ends, but it ends at a moment where the world is on the verge of something, not just the characters, the world. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, right? It happens. A lot of stuff happens after that day. So I just think it was interesting. And that was a lot of fun to direct, actually, those 2 episodes, because there's so much of the puzzle kind of taking shape and opening to something else. It's a lot of fun to do that. So a little less comedic maybe, but a little more like story with openings, at the end.
I'm so glad that you brought up the moment where there is the cameo of you playing Julie Delpy against your character in that scene, because it also plays so well because you're playing against the grain and against your own self as like a completely different archetype of a person. And
I'm not Julie Delpy as I know myself. It's like this.
And that's why it works so well. But I know that obviously, you were shooting this in the middle of COVID, kind of late summer, early fall last year, I think.
Fall, yeah.
From the middle of those waves where things open up for a brief little point. But I know that from that, there was less opportunity to bring people in for things like guest stars and cameo moments. Was it always the intention that scene was going to be Julie Delpy as Julie Delpy, or were there different explorations of that scene?
No, actually, the truth is, originally, I wanted a celebrity. I contacted a few people, and the truth is, no one, first of all, the character was a bit like a not so nice version of themselves. And I asked a few people, and truly people didn't really want to play a not so nice version of themselves in my show. They were embarrassed to be an unlikable version of themselves, I think. And also the truth is also, I'm sure people didn't want to take the risk to catch COVID, on a set while just to do a cameo, I don't know. It was a combination of both. And I quickly was like, forget it, and then I went to bed, and I was like, as I always go to bed when I can't have a solution, we were like a week away from shooting or something. And I called the producer in the morning. I was like, I have an idea. What do you think? Is it too crazy? And he's like, no, it's great. Let's do that. No, because I thought to myself, I was like, who do I know who's famous, who's in LA, who's not scared of coming to a set and catch COVID? and I was like, I don't know many famous people who are in LA who are okay showing up on my set. And I was like, you know what? That's it. I figured it out. And also because I had another, like I could have found a famous person, but maybe that the French didn't know or the Americans didn't know, or like I was, obviously if people are watching my show, they know who I am, you know, a little bit. So at least I knew that, you know, at least. So that was kind of a, and then it worked out. Actually, it's probably the best decision I made throughout. So.
And if you want a job done well, just do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you know, I'm doing so much myself anyway. You know, I'm writing, I'm directing, I'm doing this, I'm producing, and blah, 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 blah. You know, sometimes I do the music on my films, and you know, when I can't find a composer who wants to work for free, and so because there's no more money, because there was never money to start with. So basically, yeah, I was like, you know, why don't I do it myself?
And you were looking to direct the last couple of episodes, but you also directed the first few episodes of the series as well. And jumping off the back of what you were saying earlier about structurally with the writing, with all of these characters, it's really challenging to, you know, get fully in depth with so many characters and to really do justice to all of their storylines and all of their layers. At the same time, there's also that same challenge in the directing, and how do I want the camera to follow this character? How do I want to be framing this person in their home? How do we want to explore their narrative arc stylistically? And so how did having kind of a main ensemble of characters influence a lot of the storyboarding and a lot of the camera choices that you made and the perspective that you told the story in?
Well, I knew that the first 3 episodes, I wanted to keep a simplicity to actually just capture those moments with the characters, a little less camera movement. I mean, I got a little more wild, you know, just in the limitation of what we had and stuff in 11 and 12. And I let the other directors kind of really, you know, get cranes and do whatever they wanted with the other episodes, which were more appropriate for it anyway. But the first 3 stories, I wanted to make them a little bit minimalistic, you know, to just get into the characters more, to be less maybe showy. And yes, I did get more showy at the end because I could afford to. It was easier, more appropriate for the story. But here I just focused on the character. It was more filmed in close up, a little less camera movement, a little more still. I just wanted something a little more simple to just get into the characters more than the style, you know. But we did agree on a style which was, you know, pretty realistic and simple. You know, we didn't go crazy, even though I had fun doing like some crazy helicopter shot at the episode 12 and all sorts of crazy, whatever, fun shots, you know, with the fighting and but it's still simple, you know, it's still not insane. There barely any visual effects. I mean, there are a few obviously, but you know, to get rid of things and, you know, but.
And kind of going back to that idea that we really get to see these characters in their rawest forms because they've known each other, they have such a history with each other, so they're completely unfiltered with one another, you know, the way that you were talking about before. Did that also influence a lot of the choices you made in terms of locations and settings that we see these characters in? Because there's a different intimacy in watching characters sitting on the sidelines at their kids' sports practice and having a dinner party in their home than being in other spaces where there's a lot of external people moving around them versus these spaces where it's all about just the intimacy of this group.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that, you know, we were conscious of like the different moments and different, you know, yes, obviously, you know, also it was very important for me to pick the right environment for each character. Like they all have their own, they're very different in a way. They have their own life in a different world. I mean, I have friends that live, you know, that have 1 bedroom with 2 kids, you know, that are, you know, and then I have friends that have too many rooms and, you know, are they happier? I'm not sure, but, you know, they, you know, I wanted to show different environment of life and different environment also when they're together, you know, it becomes something else when they're, you know, when they're at a party, it's something else. When they're having dinner, it's something else. They're not always together, the characters. Sometimes it's only 2, sometimes it's, you know, Elle visiting my home, you know, trying to help me out with my Instagram, you know, it's like all sorts of different configuration on a hike, because that's something people do when they get together. It's not always easy when you have kids and you're in your mid 40s to 50s, it's harder to meet, you know, unless you and get your kids to hang out and, you know, and you figure out a way to do something together, but it's not something you do every single day, you know.
And
you're not 20 anymore, you know, where you can just hang out all day. Until I was actually 35, until I had a kid, I was hanging out with my friends every day, you know, passing out on their couch, sleeping over. It's like I didn't care about anything, you know. But then it's a very different life after you have kids, for sure.
Given how much of a journey it has been to get this story to screen, and how it has been such a personal story to explore through these characters, when you kind of look at the finished version, what are the aspects of it that you feel proudest of, and how you've eventually been able to tell this story and explore these characters?
I think the arc, what I like about the characters and the story is they all have a journey, which, as I said, you start one place and you end somewhere else. I think all of them have it in a different way. I think Yasmin finds herself again, and then loses herself at the end again. You know, so she goes from being a bit confused to together for a while, and then back to left again in a world where she's not working again, you know, where it's like really difficult for her to handle. My character is figuring out that this is not what her life has to be, right? Elle is suddenly realizing that she can be successful by exploiting her misery. Anne realized that she wants freedom, that it goes way above money, you know, because if you have money and no freedom, what does it mean, right? Money is not always freedom, at least not in her case. So it's all about this liberation in a way for everyone with different journey, or a realization, or, you know, something is happening to them that is making them, from the day one of January 4th until the last day of the show on February 29th, which is, by the way, a day that only happens every 4 years. The weird day, this weird, strange day, which is, by the way, really when the announcement that's done at the end of the show really happened, which is really strange. You think the first death by COVID was on February 29th. So it's a weird, I mean, I did base it on real, obviously I can't lie about that stuff. So it's a CDC thing. But I wanted this world to be, you know, like, wow, this whole thing is really, you know, really a lot happened in their life. Even if nothing happened, a lot happened.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I loved most in watching this show is that even if we weren't seeing your face on screen throughout, if we didn't see your name, that it still comes across as having that really clear, distinctive voice that you always have as a creator, as a writer, as a filmmaker. So congratulations on everything with the show. I'm so glad all the stars aligned for us to finally get to see this. And thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.